on LK. Yeah. All right, so let's take a look first. So we had a little bit of like tariff news, and then Roku caught a downgrade today. So I put a lot of pressure on number one, the software sector, which has been the hot sector. And then, of course, that also takes down the market too, along with this tariffy thing that's been going on. We haven't really violated our current short-term trend yet. You know, a close under the 20 would probably give us another day of weakness down to the lower Bollinger Band-ish area. At the moment, you know, beyond that, you know, we can see the selling has subsided a little bit here, and we just need to, we'll see if we start to break over the VWAP. That could kind of, you know, start a little squeeze going and, you know, take this thing back. Remember that it's a bull market, so you oftentimes, like, you may have a big flush at the open, and you could see like some scary numbers where you'd be like, wow, the market's just getting smoked here, and then you can completely reverse, you know, and you're even seeing that in some of these stocks like, you know, Peloton, LK. You see a lot of them are starting to go green, which is, you know, you want to see that kind of action in individual names. So let's talk about the trade. So the first trade of the day, we took two trades right at the open. One was in APA, and the other one was in Roku. So APA was a very, very simple setup. I took this thing at 20.04. I actually tried to short it even a little bit earlier than that, but I wasn't able to get filled because the SSR was on. It was taking me a second here. But you can see like what was happening here is right off the bat, like this thing just got tanked out right at the open. So, you know, what I was doing was I was trying to time kind of this thing on multiple time frames. So if you look at what the pre-market data on real quick, you can see that you had a nice trend pre-market. I find that the best ORB plays, guys, are the ones where you have a downtrend pre-market, then you also have the daily chart breaking down over here, right? And so what I'm doing is, you know, like, you know, 9:31, so I'm already starting to short like the first like minute of the trading day. You know, usually an ORB requires kind of multiple candles. But what you could do is if you got a big downtrend pre-market like this one, then what you can do is you're just looking for a shake and bake. So what I mean by shake and bake is see how like this thing popped up here? So it would almost make you think like it's reversing. But you got to remember, without the pre-market data, there's a huge gap on it. So, you know, you won't see that, you won't even be able to see really that pop, you know, with the pre-market data. So what you want to be doing is really be mindful of, you know, the different kind of levels. So what we're doing is as soon as this thing pops up here and then it busts back under these MAs on the VWAP here, I'm already looking to short this thing because I know that now at this point it's a failure. And then I'm going on a smaller term chart just to make sure that, you know, I'm timing this. And so when it's about to break under this 20, I'm starting to already load shorts. Now the SSR is on it, so I got to leave orders all over the place just to get filled properly because you can't short it on the bid. And then it was just a matter of just shredding fast. You know, once it broke under this 1962, you know, now we know that we've got confirmation. So I want to take some off into the flush down. Anytime you get a couple big candles, like you always want to take some off. So we took some off at 1954 and then another one fourth at 1919. You know, so as this thing just keeps flushing down, I'm just covering out. You don't know exactly where to cover. You just got to follow the price action and keep scaling out. Scaling out is really, really important because oftentimes at a stock like this, it could drop down dollars or it could just drop down dollars for minutes and then completely reverse on you. So you got to be really careful of, you know, how you're taking this out. The other thing is, you know, if you can get $1 or even more, that's a $20 stock. That's a 5% gain in 2 to 5 minutes. That's something you always want. That's something you always want to be checking. So I covered some of this and I kept a quarter of it with the stop at my buy price, and it's just farting around the last quarter of it. I didn't get stopped out as it popped up here. I lost track of it for a hot second because we were messing around with that Roku. The next trade, yeah, I took Roku. I shorted 144.14 and then 143.80 is the rest. And then it's just a matter of kind of covering in. Now, I did an early cover on this, but let me tell you the idea on this and why I'm going to be, you know, the idea on this and like why I'm trying to, you know, scale into this one is that Roku has like a wild range. And if you guys remember, like we have had really like some ups and downs with Roku over the last few weeks when the range gets too wild. And like each intraday candle, if the intraday candles are like $3, $4, how can you manage the trade with any size? You know, then at that point, if it's like, it's hard to even do 100 shares if you're moving $3, $4, $5 per candle. So what I want to do is like, as this thing popped up and it popped into the EMAs, right? We know that you need 3 candles for an ORB, right? You know, we need 3 candles for the ORB. So what I want to do is like, as this thing pops up a little bit, it starts to form, I'm going to take, you know, partial position, and then on confirmation, I'm going to get the rest in. You know, so on confirmation, I short the rest. So I'm adding some, and then boom, I get confirmation, I get the rest. Now I covered half for about $1, you know, at 142.39. So, you know, maybe $1.50, $2, as that's my custom, right? At any time I get, you know, that kind of gain very quickly, I'm always going to take some off the table. Then it's just about really trailing it down, you know, and then to the next push, I took some off the table. The next push, I took some off the table, and I just covered all the way into this and took that quick, you know, gain, covered out the last of it in the 139.80s, which is a good trade considering, you know, that's 5 points from that first part. Now, where I made my mistake was I should have kept maybe that last 1/4 and then looked for ways to, you know, re-enter. You know, you can see here you bear flagged again, and so I ended up leaving like $6 on the table for a couple things. So I made 2 mistakes here. Sure, good trade. You know, you make some money in the open, the first 10, 15 minutes, that's a good trade. But the big, hairy but is that if you have the opportunity to catch like a big shred, 10 points, 12 points, that can not just make your day, but it could make your week or even your month if you're sized in properly. So I made 2 mistakes. I should have kept that last 1/4 and just wrote down my 9 EMA. But the second mistake I made was I could have added maybe another, this setup right here, that's not like a prime, pristine, grade A setup, but it is a setup. I'll give that a B setup, especially with the momentum that's coming in, along with the market conditions. So I could have added another 1/4 size here and kept a half position, and that would have really, I mean, that would have added thousands of dollars essentially to the trade, which would have been sweet, right? That's something that can, once again, it can take your week from a good week to a great week, or a great week to an epic week. I needed to really kind of fix those kind of 2 things on that. Next trade I took was on BYND. I shorted some at 77.57. Yeah, I used a $1 stop. We covered this thing pretty quick. I ended up covering it flat at 77.49. And the reason was that I had the wrong entry on it. So one thing to remember when you're taking a trade is, if your entry is too low, you got to hold through retracement. So, you know, I saw this thing kind of pop up on the scanner. It was hitting on the, you know, it was showing up on the scanner, and I was looking at it, and it dropped a little bit fast. I ended up shorting it too close near the breakdown spot, too close near the low of day. And so what ended up happening is I missed the real move here, which was the breakdown, the pop into the VWAP 20 EMA, and then the curl down. You know, when you're shorting into this big red candle, it's essentially a chase. So like as I'm holding through this, you know, I know right off the bat, like I'm like, yeah, because at second look, once you're actually in the trade and you can stare at it, you know, like, okay, this stock it's a little too extended. My short is a little bit too low. And so at that point, you just want to kind of cover out flat into this if you can, because my analysis was wrong and my entry was off, right? The execution of what I wanted to do was wrong. Where we sometimes make mistakes as traders is we know we've done something, you know, wrong on the trade, and we still hold on to it, right? Because we're like hoping and praying, like maybe it'll work, maybe it'll work. That's not the way to do it. You know, if you get into a trade and once you're in it, you're like, crap, I've chased it, or this is not the right setup, then it's going to pay you long term to just get out of it flat and make sure that you don't hurt yourself, because all it takes is one bad trade. So you end up covering this thing flat. What are you gonna do, right? And the next trade I took, I actually took a loss on, which was JNUG. So JNUG I took a loss on. I longed this at 62.26 and I ended up selling at 61.60. This was a bungled trade for a couple reasons. JNUG, first of all, like, you're under all this resistance here, but my thinking was if it gets over that 50 SMA, it can go, especially if it breaks the previous day's high. The issue is the JNUG had come a long way into my entry. So I took the entry as it broke the previous day's high and it went red to green. So you have two different setups there. When you have a convergence of setups, break of previous day's highs and a red to green, that's a nice trade. That's a nice setup because you're getting multiple things working in your favor. But if you see where the move started, JNUG gapped down, it started to move at 60.25, then broke over the VWAP at 61. I'm getting it late to the party. I'm late to the party on this thing. It's essentially just a chase. It's a chase, and it's a big candle to chase into. So if you think about it, this is like $1.75 into the candle. It's just it's too extended. It's too extended. And so anytime, so remember this, guys, anytime a stock is extended going into resistance, it's going to retrace. It's going to retrace and then pop back. And so what ends up happening is, as this thing breaks back under the breakdown spot, I got to get out of this thing, essentially. I got to get out of this thing. And because my entry is wrong, I end up selling it on support because I didn't want to wait to all the way down to the VWAP and, turn this into like a bigger loss. So I end up selling on support and then it rips back. And that's the nature. When your entry is wrong, it governs and changes the whole dynamics of your trade. Because then now you got to hold through the retracement, but you don't want to let your loss turn into too big of a loss. So you end up selling it. You sell it on support, and then it rips back. That's why the entry is the most important thing in risk management. Your risk management is obviously our number one job as traders, but the most important part of a risk manager is not putting your stop loss in the right spot and sizing it. It's about having the best entry, because if you have a great entry, then your risk is small, and whether you win or lose, it doesn't really matter. You can sell it and then re-enter it. That's where, you got to be just a little bit careful. Now it's just farting around. It may not even have any juice on this bad boy. It may not even have any juice on this bad boy. Then we took a couple trades that just ended up being flat. So I did the same thing on Bazoo. At midday, guys, I tend to once the first hour is over, you've got to be really careful. So you got a bear flag over here on the daily chart. Stock broke down, popped into its VWAP. It did a fizzle, came back down, made a low at 35, popped up, made a lower high, which is good. And now you got yourself like a triple tap breakdown. This kind of setup works really well. It just happens to be like, if it starts to just sit around too long, I usually just get out of it because it's midday. So I ended up covering this thing flat. Once it tried to break down, but it just couldn't get the heat, then at that point, I come in with the assumption that maybe it's used up its daily range. Its daily range seems to be about 6-7%. So, if you're shorting the low end of the range and it's used up its daily range, you may have to sit through some retracements or some fun and games. And, it did drop like a couple pennies after, but we're not in the game for a couple pennies. So this type of setup does work. It's got to work quick. Like, it was like the same thing, right? We were looking at chatroom at ARWR. If 69 was the bear flag here, and you had 1 test, 2 tests, 3 tests, 4 tests, and it broke down, but it worked fast, right? It'll drop like $2.50, $3 really fast. That's what you want to see. If they start to grind along, then you don't have the volatility that the open gives you because you're getting closer to midday. So midday things slow down. So if you get the entry and then just starts to grind along, man, you may be stuck in that thing for hours. So I'd rather it either works there, works quick, or I get out, right? I get out and just let this thing shred down you know, and then I took a trade in CRSP and then GBT, which we'll talk about here. CRSP was just a bad trade on my end. This is like not a good trade. So CRSP ran into resistance. Biotechs are rolling over today. So it rolled over. You can actually short this on the green to red move. I shorted on this bear flag here, right here. And this is what I mean by like a stock's got to, you know, work quickly. As soon as we shorted it, you know, it got down to 67.20. So I was up like $1.30 on it. I got to cover half into that. In general, no matter what, because your 9 EMA is so close, like you have very low risk on the trade anyways. If you get $1 on a trade, just in layman's talk, and it's not very scientific, but if you get $1 on a trade and it's midday, take some profit on it. Take some profit on it because you're gonna get retracements midday. You don't get the same action midday as you would at the open. So my mistake on this was it moved so quick and there's a spread on it. And I had some orders laid around in the low 67s to cover some. And it came to like, you know, a few pennies and then just ripped back up. And, you know, I ended up covering this thing out at 68.80. So I ended up losing like 30, 40 cents on the thing, a couple $100 when I was up like over $500 on it, all because of one thing. I was farting around and near 67, laying in orders on the bids, mostly to collect the ECN fees because I'm cheap. And I ended up letting this thing come all the way back. You can see it squeeze like $1 something in one candle. These biotech stocks, they can move really fast. They can move really fast. And so we've got to always be covering, put a stop at the buy price, cover, put a stop at the buy price. Your best trades, they should work fast. You know, like this GBT. This is the last trade we took that we're still in some. GBT like had this awesome relative strength here, right? It's a daily trader at this point. You came out of this range here. Once I saw this thing come out of range and it's holding green, you know, we're looking for the first pullback. So once we come back to the 9 EMA, I get a green candle to hold, I'm in this bad boy. I'm a green candle to hold, I'm in this bad boy. Into the first shred, you know, I sell off half. So I got off half at 70.10s, and then now I'm riding half of the stop at the buy price. And we'll see what happens. It's starting to flag out again, but now midday, they just tend to take a little bit longer to roll in. So far so good. It's been a semi-solid day. I think the bigger, you know, the main thing was that JNUG, I chased it, and so I paid the price on a loss on that one. You know, everything else was fairly good. I do think that, you know, I got to be a little bit more alert. You know, a stock like CRSP that drops so fast, you got to always cover some into it, guys, because if you don't, they'll reverse back at you, especially on the short side. Why? On the short side, the market is trending so hot right now. You can't overstay your welcome on shorts. They drop for like, man, they drop for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then it's done, right? It's done. And that's all that happens. So guys, and remember, we do this Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, these reviews. Guys, go on the module page, you know, spend some time watching all these. You know, we've got so many market recaps on that, you know, that's one of like the best, I think, learning. It's going to be one of the best learning experiences you can do as members of the chat room and stuff. There's so much content right now, you know, that we've been putting in. So, you know, as you guys are going through this every day and you're doing your studies, right? Lesson of the day, always very important. These are the small little nuggets. These are the small little nuggets that you need that are like the nuances that you might not fit in class. You know, we got the on-demand class over here, routines and, you know, all that fun stuff that you need, the different patterns. And then, of course, right, we're on market recap number 40. These are all 30, 40-minute kind of things. You want to watch these because it's going to teach you about the patterns, but then also the different lessons that we can take from the patterns. You know, I think that's going to be important. You know, if you're paying for a subscription to Chat Access, you want to use really every single resource available. I think we're going to have a fun afternoon, though. Let's open this thing up to some questions, and we'll have ourselves a little pizza party.